On your show this week, you said Scott Laughton's going to be a Leaf or Scott Laughton's going nowhere. You nailed it.
Yep. It's one of those things, right, where it's a perfect fit for everybody. Toronto and Toronto Maple Leafs fans have been wanting Scott Laughton for, it feels like, half a decade at this point. He's a Toronto-ish native, the GTA. We know how that works. I honestly think this is a good deal for both sides. I don't think either side got fleeced. I don't think any of that. I think each side got pieces and retention that they needed, and it's going to be good for each team's timeline. So I'm thrilled as somebody who's allowed to cheer for the Leafs now with what they did today. Obviously not as much as I would have been if Rantanen or whatever was involved, but I think this was a great deal for Philadelphia. I think it's a great deal for Toronto. It's one of those rare deals where it's hey, everyone, good job.
No, so that's now that you are a Leafs fan, you're in the area. I do love he's from the GTA. Isn't 2/3 of the league
Ontario is
couldn't we fill 12 teams with players from there? But anyway, so you are actually enthused, and the Leafs made other moves, but you're actually enthused about the acquisition of Scott Laughton.
Well, okay, so part of when I heard it was Scott Laughton, I was okay, great. And then I heard it was going back, and I was there had better be some retention, because otherwise I will not be very happy. And then I did some math when I found out that it was 50% retained. The Toronto Maple Leafs basically took Ryan Reeves out of the lineup and replaced him with Scott Laughton at an extra $400,000. And I'm well, that is more than a $400,000 upgrade. I'll tell you that for free. So I look at that and I go, yeah, really happy about that. Toronto's biggest hole was the third line center. I mean, they played 60 odd games. I've probably watched 57 of them. And it is glaringly apparent that they needed that. And the other thing I like about Scott Laughton is he's kind of a jerk. In the playoffs, you look at what Florida just did. They have the ultimate rat line. They're going to have Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, and Matthew Tkachuk on the same line. Murder is going to be legal in the playoffs. It's going to be crazy. Scott Laughton is at least a guy that's willing to be a dick. And that's kind of one of those things where I think that's important in the playoffs. The Leafs get punked in every playoff series they play in, and now they finally have a guy who's yeah, that's not going to be a thing anymore.
We were joking when we saw the Marchand trade go down. Imagine being the Leafs, the big bad Bruins. They're out of your life. It's over finally, and suddenly, oh yeah, the favorites in the East. They just got that guy. What was your gut reaction to that Marchand trade?
I honestly, I was about to text his sister and be are you kidding? What the heck? But here's honestly, I think tinfoil hat on. Brad Marchand is a Bruin through and through, and he is an excellent leader. Do not be surprised if what happened here was basically he allowed them to trade him so he could go on a cup run, and they're recouping assets. If Brad Marchand signs for the Boston Bruins on July 1st, I'm not suggesting that they have a contract in the drawer at all. I'm suggesting that Brad Marchand is a responsible leader who understands the situation that the Bruins are in. And, hey, he can go chase another cup and then come back. No one's saying he's not allowed to do that. And it allows Boston to acquire assets. I think this is kind of a win-win for the Bruins. At that point, you get the chance to re-sign the guy, because if we're being so serious here, they're not naming a captain right now. And if he comes back, he's still going to be the captain. So nobody get rid of those jerseys yet. And it's just, as a Leaf fan, I saw that and I was I'm going to cry. I hate this.
And no, it's that Keith Tkachuk thing.
He's going to score.
Go on the run with the team and then go right back. And now he's playing with Tkachuk's son. I think it's all funny. But I know you're a professional. You have contacts in the league. I will say I think they have that contract in a drawer. As soon as they signed, it's all right, we're not going to register this yet. You're traded.
And the other thing is Brad Marchand, I have been emotionally scarred by him for a number of years. But, at least, you know what? At least, Toronto and Florida probably aren't going to play in the first round unless Tampa wins the division somehow, which I don't see happening. So, if Toronto gets through the first round, if Florida gets through the first round, they're going to meet in the second round. And, we talk about like Dallas and Colorado being in a psycho war in the first round of the playoffs. Tampa, Florida, or Toronto, Florida, or whoever plays, and then that second round, like whoever comes out of the Atlantic and the Central is going to be half dead by the time they do.
War of attrition. That's the Stanley Cup playoffs.
This is true. Rachel, wanted to ask you about Nikita Grebenkin, the prospect that the Flyers got in the deal. We spoke with Alex Appleyard, who's one of our contributors, our foreign correspondent, as Bill calls him. He was familiar with him, but as someone who follows the Maple Leafs very closely, what can you tell us about him? What's your view of his quality as a prospect?
Yeah, he's the perfect Philadelphia Flyer. When you think of personality and the way he plays and what Philadelphia Flyer hockey has been since its inception, this is kind of a guy where I'm like, Flyer. It's the Squidward meme, where you kind of just like, yeah, you're a Flyer. He skates well. He's one of those guys where the coach will say, hey, to win tonight, I need you to do this, Nikita. And he'll just look at him and be like, yep, got it. And then go out and do it. So if it's, I need you to skate hard and penalty kill and forecheck, he'll do that. I need you to back check and get in a fight and lay some hits. He's going to do that. Also, his personality is super conducive to a young team because the guy just loves to have fun. I've seen him out and about in Toronto. He is just a ball of fun, constant positive energy. I think he's going to fit really nicely with Michkov because, number one, Russian, but number two, that personality I think is going to help draw Michkov's personality out. And I think that's also going to be really helpful to the Flyers because these types of players are at their best when they're able to be fully themselves. And I think any way that you can get that out of Michkov is a great way. And I think Grebenkin is exactly what the Flyers need. He's going to be a bottom six guy who provides you energy, who hits, who fights, who skates really well. But he's also just going to be, he's a guy who can turn momentum because he is not afraid to do anything to win. And I think that that's going to be really, really good for the Flyers.
Okay, and it is Grebenkin. That's the way you say it?
Yeah, okay, so that's the way I've heard him say it.
Okay.
So I'm like,
we'll go with that.
That works, yes. Good enough. That's official.
Elite Prospect still has the Y in there, and it's not on Hockey Reference, so I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
And I can't pronounce like my own name, basically.
This is true. You're still trying to figure out how to pronounce February.
And
so.
it's like melts. Yeah, I can't pronounce one of the 12 months. Like it's tough for me. Zooming out now, we don't have to do all Flyer stuff. A lot went on today. Just looking at the winners and losers, a lot of big moves were made. The Mikko Rantanen trade. I saw you guys even got Brandon Carlo right before the deadline. A lot went on. Give me your two winners and two losers at this deadline.
Okay, so Dallas has to be a winner. I feel like that's kind of a cop-out answer, is it not? Like that's kind of a cop-out. Like so what's wild is like they would be a winner if they just got Rantanen, right? The fact that they signed Wyatt Johnston to $8.4 million is frankly like the fact, honestly, Jim Nill and Nico Harrison operating business in the same building has to create like the most whiplash effect for Dallas sports fans. Cause it's like you got one guy who is the laughing stock of the sports world and you got another guy who should win GM of the year. Like, getting Wyatt Johnson signed, getting Mikko Rantanen traded for and signed and then you got like Mikhail Granlund and Cody Ceci, like just outrageous business done by the Dallas Stars. I also think Colorado is a major, major winner here. You got Martin Necas, you got Jack Doerrie, and that's great. I don't think that's enough. But then you turned around and you got Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle. So your center depth just went from Nathan MacKinnon and a band of merry men to Nathan MacKinnon, Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle. Like that's a problem. And I think the Central and the Atlantic is going to be just all-out war, which is why I kind of look at this now and I go, are the Vegas Golden Knights sneaky here because they might not have a ton of issues getting out of their division the way that the Oilers are currently playing? And from a loser perspective, two teams that are Canadian, the Oilers lost today, and I'm allowed to say this with like glee across my face, the Vancouver Canucks, like, what are you doing? It's seriously, like, it's just outrageous to me that you didn't trade Brock Besser in the seller market. Edmonton, I don't understand. Like, yeah, I like the acquisition of Wallman. The fact that you didn't get a goaltender is just unacceptable to me. I look at that and I'm like, you can't have that. And I thought those two teams actually could have made a deal. I think Besser would have been a great fit in Vancouver or in Edmonton from Vancouver next to Leon Draisaitl or Connor McDavid. They need a scoring winger. And so for me, Edmonton and Vancouver today, like that, just unacceptable to do nothing.
I just saw that Pittsburgh didn't move Raquel either, which I think that's also a big mistake on their part. They did not nearly sell enough for how bad that team is.
It seems like a lot of the big moves, especially like the acquisitions, are out west. This East playoff race, the East isn't great, but it's very interesting to me. I can't wait to see who comes out of it. But
the three best teams are all in the same division at this point. Like, I mean, Washington didn't do anything, and I get like why. But you look at Florida, you look at Tampa, and now you look at what Toronto did. Like, it's hard to make the argument that, like, Washington kind of got left behind here. Like, acquiring Anthony Beauvillier is just, like, not going to cut it when Florida went out and got Brad Marchand and Seth Jones. Toronto got Brandon Carlo and Scott Laughton. And then Tampa went out and reacquired Yanni Gourde and got Oliver Bjorkstrand. Like, it kind of seems like Washington didn't do a ton. And as much as I think Washington is a good team, we haven't seen a lot of these players in the playoffs. And we have seen a whole lot of Florida and a whole lot of Tampa in the playoffs. I will reserve my Toronto comments because they are well documented of what I think of some of those players in the playoffs. But I mean, I'm taking Florida and Tampa in any series over Washington right now.
Speaking of Toronto, Chris Johnston just reported that the Pens are acquiring Connor Timmins from Toronto.
Kyle Dubas, how we doing?
There you go. Who do you think gets these wild card spots, Rachel, in the East? Right now, just by total points, we're looking at Columbus and Ottawa. The Rangers are right there. Detroit's right there. Most of the East is basically right there within a point or two. How do you think this wild card comes down?
So I think the Rangers do get into the playoffs. And the reason I say that is I'm making the calculation that I think the Devils are in a heap of trouble right now. Number one, like somebody was yelling at me on Twitter today, like that they shouldn't go acquire Mikko Rantanen for long term because like they're not a contender or they are a contender this year. And I was like, I'm sorry, the New Jersey Devils are not a contender without Jack Hughes. That is just straight up false. Like, what are you saying? But I still thought that the Devils acquiring Rantanen would have been a good idea, because immediately next year they are a contender. And if they added Rantanen, they would have been. So I think they're in a bit of trouble. I think they could slide out potentially. They're one injury and Dougie Hamilton is out away from being in big trouble. So I look at this. I think the Rangers are going to get in. I do like what they've done. They also have Igor Shesterkin, who is, when he's on his best, he's the best goaltender in the Metropolitan Division. And so I think that's a calculation I make. To me, it comes down to Columbus and Ottawa. I like what Ottawa did. I'm just not sure that it's necessarily enough. And Columbus looks really good. They're playing well. They made some acquisitions over the deadline. They didn't sell off any. I thought they were going to get Brock Besser at one point. But Columbus is kind of one of those teams where it's kind of lightning in a bottle a little bit. And I mean, how do you not root for them, right? Like it's kind of one of those things. I think everyone here wants to see Columbus get in the playoffs right now. And so I'm going to say this. I think the Devils probably get in, but in a wild card spot, or they just barely stay in that third spot. And I'm going to go Columbus and the Rangers for the wild card spots. But I will say this. It's going to come down to the last weekend. Like I think those three teams are going to come down to last weekend.
All right, before we let you go, I can't possibly let the CTO of Betalytics, and last time we spoke, you were launching the new site. I hope all is going well, but I can't possibly let you go before we talk about the Calder Trophy race. Celebrini still pretty prohibitive favorite, minus 220. Hudson's there at plus 215. Mishkov 10-1. Dustin Wolf 22-1. How do you think this shakes out?
This is so stupid to me. Like, I don't understand this. Like, Dustin Wolf should be the prohibitive favorite at this point. Like, the fact that he's 25-1, I do not understand this. Like, Calgary is nowhere near the playoffs without his play. It is infinitely more difficult to be a goaltender than it is to be any other position as a rookie. And the fact that he is the only player that hasn't had an injury or a performance lull all season long. Celebrini's had an injury. Hudson has had 2 performance lulls. Michkov's had performance lulls. Like, it's ridiculous to me. And then outside of Wolf, I don't even have Celebrini. I have Lane Hudson because the guy is approaching like Larry Murphy, Ray Bourque, Chris Chelios level history here. And yeah, Celebrini's having a good year, but he's not anywhere near history. And so for me, I think those are the top 3. I have Michkov at 4, but Dustin Wolf, the disrespect for me is just it's totally ridiculous. And then Lane Hudson, I think if you're going to go with a skater, I think it has to be Lane Hudson because he's making history. He has a ton of points and he's a defenseman. And it's not like he's playing on a team where he's being all that sheltered. He is being sheltered somewhat, but he's still having to play tough minutes. He's still averaging well over 20 minutes a game. So for me, I look at that and I go, yeah, like playing defense is really hard. I have Dustin Wolf, then Lane Hudson, then Macklin Celebrini.
All right, Rachel, thank you for joining us. I hope to talk to you again soon. Always a pleasure when Rachel Doerrie joins us. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, you can go to Betalytics.com. Like Bill said, we've got a brand new website, and you can get trends for free. So I know a lot of other sites make you pay for trends. You get them on our site for free. I'm not going to charge you for stuff that you can look up on other websites. So you can get projections, you can get trends. That's where like all of my stuff is. And then the Puck Social podcast, got a brand new studio, which is super fun. And then I'm on TikTok, Puck Bucks. That's where you can find me. That's where a lot of my stuff's going to live.